Welcome to Bloom at Home. My name is Gary Graham, show manager for Board B at Bloom. As you know, we can't bring the show to you this year from the Phoenix Park, but what we can do is use this opportunity to celebrate some of the outstanding aspects of the show and share some of the great inspiration that we get every year when we gather over the June Bank holiday weekend. There are so many great aspects to the festival. It's a great family day out. People love to come and share that time in that beautiful setting. And for us in Board B, it's a great opportunity to celebrate all that we can bring to you from food, drink and horticulture from across the country. But at the very heart of the show are the show gardens themselves. That's where the excitement, the razzmatazz, the showbiz element is. And I'm delighted to say that I've got three of the country's top garden designers, multiple gold medal winners here with me today to share this conversation.
My name is Jane McCorkrell and I'm a landscape architect.
My name's Oliver Schurmann and I run Mount Venus Nursery.
My name is Andrew Dunne, owner of Andrew Christopher Garden Design.
We find ourselves in very interesting times which are challenging, absolutely challenging, but also it seems that there are a lot of people out there who have woken up to the fact that they have a garden, or they just discovered that garden outside their back door that maybe they hadn't ventured into very often before. And maybe there's that growing appreciation of that piece of space, that piece of safe space at the back of the house. If the house is the new castle or kingdom, then the garden is certainly part of the kingdom. What's your observations on that? Do you see that as an opportunity? Do you think people are going to become more aware and appreciative of their green space?
I think people have all of a sudden realised how lucky they are if they do have a garden. So, because if you were in lockdown in an apartment, it mustn't be very pleasant. So I think it's been a bit of an eye-opener that actually I have a garden out here and it's not too bad. Maybe I'll make it look like something a little bit better. So they've realised that it's not this bad thing or this scary thing to step outside into. Yeah. I think that's been really important for people to realise.
So maybe it'll help some people to where maybe previously they, I haven't got the green fingers or haven't got the knowledge or the time. The time is the big factor, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Well, the one thing that I see is that people are understanding, and because they're inside a house and the house is static, everything is static around it, and if they're looking out at a static garden, it's actually very boring. A garden is so dynamic, and if they understand that a garden is dynamic and it develops. I mean, us as designers, we're really I often say, we only vaccinate the garden with plants, a few here, but it's your baby. You have to look after it. You have to let those plants develop. You have to add to them. And once you understand how exciting this is, and that it's going to evolve over years, and you have all these different habitats to allow for so many different kinds of plants. And if you find the right spot for the right plant and the right spot for it, it's so satisfying to see that plant grow.
It doesn't have to be, though, Oliver, it doesn't have to always be that you have to get it right the first time. You always hear about people, they say to you, well, I tried to do this and then it wouldn't grow. Well, so try again. You know, it's not the end of the world. Gardening is an interactive sport. You know, it's meant to be, you know, you can't be passive about it. We can be passive in the summer when you've done all your work and you want to sit down and enjoy your garden, right? But all the time up to that, when we've been in lockdown, is the time to get out and get, you know, interact with it and experiment and try new things and do something different.
I think it's funny, it's like people are now discovering this secret, the secret that, wow, I have this green space and it could be more than a lawn, it could be an incredible place to entertain, it could be, you know, time to spend with my family, and it's something they're just discovering. And I kind of find it funny because myself as a garden designer, and I know every other garden designer is the same, we've been banging on about this for years. We've been telling you, do you know how lucky you are to have a space like this? Do you know how amazing it could be? I mean, I think it's safe to say for myself and probably most of the other designers first, the first thing we have to do in our profession when we meet a new potential client is to show people the possibilities. I think that's very much what Bloom's about. It's about showing people the possibilities. I mean, I think everybody who visits Bloom should see it the week we move in.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the most uninspiring, dull, wet, poorly drained site. And, 3-4 weeks down the line, it's just packed full of life and gardens and interest. And that's the same with everybody's garden. So, I mean, we've been trying to tell people for so long what you could do. And that's really our job, first and foremost, to say, well, look, do you know what? This space, this is what it could be. You could be, and get people to imagine themselves in that space, very much the same as a show garden. And then gradually, people will trust you and allow you to have more of an input in their space. But yeah, I'd definitely be on Jane's side of saying that, you got to give it a go. Yeah. You don't have to have a fabulous, manicured, beautiful garden where everything's power washed to perfection and all the rest. I mean, what did I do in lockdown? Did I, as a professional garden designer, do all these wonderful projects and grow vegetables and, save the planet through my garden? No, I spent the whole time with my kids, running around, playing hide and seek, making obstacle courses, doing all those things. And why? Because a garden is a life, it's part of your life. And it's not just that you have a house and a garden, you've a home, and it's all part of the one thing.
And a constantly changing space, which I think for me is the big thing, that you've had that opportunity to actually notice plants grow over a period of weeks or months where you haven't been so busy with your work or being away from your home or your garden that you miss that.
And years, Gary. People do that. They think, it'd be all very nice, Andrew, if people turned up to bloom, they saw it the week it starts and then they see it at the end. And you know what would happen? They'd all go, but why doesn't mine look like that 3 weeks later? That's not the case. Gardens have to, like you say, they have to evolve, and it takes years, right? And you can't be afraid to try things new. I'm trying something new at the moment because I reckon, you never learn, you never know everything about gardening. So my latest thing is I've bought myself this pack. It's a living wall pack, right? So it's I bought it in, and all of the pieces are cups, and it's sitting on the back wall there now, and I've the compost sitting there, and I've the irrigation sitting there, and it's looking at me, right? And I'm just trying to decide what way I want to tackle it. But constantly, every year, there's something new, there's something different to change up. And there's no, get rid of the idea that, I grew that and it died. You didn't fail, it died. Actually, 2 of my really good plants died this year. I don't know why they did it. They just decided they didn't like me anymore. That's the way life, plants are nearly like cats. Yeah, you don't own them, they own you.
Yeah. Jane, you have a new garden, don't you?
I do. I have a lovely new garden, southwest facing. I even ventured to doing a bit of painting. And I hate painting in the new garden. But yeah, no, it's very exciting. Yeah, really good.
Oliver, have you been trying any new plants out during your time at home?
Well, I've been working, we basically run a nursery at home. I don't want to see any more plants. I'm tired. But I spend all my day, the whole day in the nursery. This year, it's because I wasn't doing bloom and so on, I had so much time. And so I've been working an awful lot on the propagation. And it's been just fascinating, and a lot of plants that we've been collecting over the years from all different parts of the world, how they've survived in pots, and just looking at me then coming up in spring, and you end up propagating those. So there's a lot of new plants that I've been growing that have just been sitting there waiting to be passed on to enthusiastic new gardeners.
So you haven't lost your enthusiasm anyway, and if you do, Liat will come out and remind you of what you should be doing.
I haven't lost my enthusiasm, but one thing that's happened, I enjoy it so much in the nursery, and I hate going anywhere. So I'm going to be a very difficult designer to get hold of, and because I like the nursery more and more.
Good to hear it, because you're surrounded by plants.
I'm surrounded by plants, and plants only.
No people. Jane, can I ask you, looking back over the years, are there particular designers or things that you've seen that you thought, well, that was really clever?
Yeah, there's always loads of ideas, loads of really nice things, and it's not that you would stand there and there's not any one part that stands out. I think there's one person I enjoyed, and he's only done it twice, which I think is an awful shame, was Gerard Mullins. I really liked the first garden he did where he whacked down the soil, and I enjoyed, watching how he made the wall look really interesting and brought in this fireplace and 2 places to sit, and it looked so nice. I like the show at about 8 o'clock in the morning. When it's just really quiet and nice and calm. And it always looked really very interesting. And I liked the way Gerard executed how he built gardens. He was very calm about it. And even though you'd say to him, "Oh, Gerard, you're very calm and you're not really inside," this kind of thing. But I think he had a very nice elegance about the way he finished everything and very well thought out. And it wasn't gimmicky, which I'm not really into gimmicks. It was very nice. Yeah, it was very, very nice the way he executed things.
I think Gerard's second garden, didn't he do the one with the garden room, the white and the stainless steel?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that was, what I liked about that garden was it was a piece of contemporary Irish design. And it's something you don't hear. I mean, if you see an Irish design in abroad, we always kind of revert back to the diddly eye Irish, which I think is an awful shame because there's plenty of talent in Ireland throughout the design world. And I think in that particular garden, he showed the beauty of Ireland. He showed, the planting was wild reeds and wild landscape, but he put something, contrast is so strong against it. And that was a very impressive garden too.
Yeah, that stands out. I think I remember some of the comments at the time he was also almost raising the bar in terms of Irish garden design, and yet somehow it linked back to the countryside and back to nature, which is hard to do to get that juxtaposition of contemporary and bold and sharp and minimalist, and then to bring it back to nature, make it sit within a natural landscape, which was a massive achievement. Anyone else that jumps out? We've had so many fantastic designers over the years who brought such amazing gardens.
I think you have to mention the Focus. I think it was the very first Focus Ireland garden. Damien Costello's Focus Ireland garden. It was very nice. It was his medium-sized garden, and he had a nest. You said it was a nest. I called it a little hut. I could just see myself going and hiding in there. It was lovely, very nicely done, and he was all business.
But
very
it's
serious.
interesting.
It was lovely though.
When you mention him, because he actually does totally different gardens.
Yeah.
Very chic gardens that he does.
Yeah.
And he was given the opportunity to do something totally different, which wasn't down his road at all,
Yeah.
It's all wildflowers, meadow.
Yeah, foxgloves.
Foxgloves, natural hedging, and the whole lot.
Yeah.
And again,
affordable.
A powerful message, because I remember him sitting down with a group of service users from Focus Ireland and asking them, what does home mean? How would you bring that alive? What would the picture be of home for you? And they said, a nest, somewhere where you feel safe and secure, your sanctuary. And that's what he did. He created a nest and wrapped an amazing garden around it. Really, really powerful use of that small space for 5 days. We've had lots of really great questions that have come in over the last few days online. And I want to try to summarize them and see can we get as much information and share as much of that great knowledge you guys have. There's a lot of questions around nature, Jane, and this kind of concern about, I want to have a little wild space, but I still want it to look smart. I'm concerned about the bees. I know that's an issue. What would you say? Any tips for people who are trying to think about nature and the bigger picture?
Okay, so the best thing that people can do is not try to change everything all in one go. And whatever they do, it only has to be a really small thing. It doesn't have to be a big gesture. It could just be a small gesture. So even if they, say for instance, their lawn, and if they were to mow around the outside of the lawn, and then they left a small part of it that they didn't mow it, and they didn't treat it, and they didn't do anything to it, they just left it alone and let it grow long. That's a really great thing to do. And the other thing to do is to remember that insects, it's not just about bees, it's about all the insects. They need food from early spring all the way through to the end, so that lots of different times of the year. So don't forget to plant some bulbs for early pollination, and plant lots of nice perennial plants, and that stop worrying that it's going to be a lot of work, because it's not, because if you just let it grow and accept that it's going to look after itself, then the insects will love it just as much. So they're just two simple little things.
And then the winter time, then you could have berries on trees, on climbers, on shrubs.
Ivy is a great food for insects at a later time. So instead of viewing everything, oh, that's a weed because you were told that's a weed, that's not true. As Oliver, we were just talking about that earlier on, saying that, just because it's perceived that we were taught that dandelions were wet the beds or whatever else we thought they were, that's not true. They're just a plant that's growing, and sometimes you just need to accept them. So maintain the edges, right? Because then it looks like it's intentional that you've let the other areas grow, and then just be a bit more relaxed about it instead of feeling that everything has to be like the Victorians. Even though the Victorians were fantastic gardeners, they were a bit too neat and tidy for us. We want things to be a little bit more fuzzy.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Andy, can I turn to you on this? Because there's a lot of questions around where do I start? And obviously, as we discussed, we have this time now to sit and assess and plan. And a lot of people are working with smaller spaces as well. I know you've designed a lot of gardens for clients with smaller gardens and courtyards. What would be your starting point, or what are the things that people should really think about? What elements should they try to include? Yeah,
it's a tough one because there can be just so much possibilities in any space. Where do you start is a big one. Well, I would say where you start is probably at home, quiet, away from the garden, sitting at the kitchen table with a pen and paper in your hand. Not to design some amazingly sophisticated program, but some space that is away from a garden centre full of bright, colourful plants and lovely things that you immediately are drawn to buy, and think, what would be right for our space? What would we want? How do we want to use it? Is it just for us, or do we want to have some people here, so maybe we need a little bit of extra space? It can get incredibly complicated, but I think the best bit of advice would be, whatever it is you do, keep it as simple as possible and do it as well as possible. I mean, I think it's amazing that, if you look at some of the most elaborate gardens in the world, even the most big blousy ones, they could all be stripped down to very simple shapes, usually rectangles or squares or circles. And your garden is the exact same way. If you can strip your garden down into simple shapes, maybe one rectangle for your patio, one rectangle for your lawn, and you can move those rectangles around and play with them. There's lots of different ways. Or you can go for something far more free-formed and more relaxed, as Jane says. I mean, that's packed full of atmosphere too. The biggest mistake people make, in my mind, is one, trying to overcomplicate things and trying to add far too many features into the one space. They want outdoor kitchens, they want awnings, they want, everything you could possibly imagine packed into one space. The other big mistake people make, and I see this constantly, is people treat their gardens understandably as projects. And they're projects that they have time for. For example, on a bank holiday weekend in Easter, everybody's garden somehow bursts into flower and then is drab for the rest of the year. And that's because on bank holiday weekend, they went to the garden centre and they bought everything that's in flower. Those same plants will flower at the same time every year, and you're forgetting about all the amazing things you can do in autumn with autumn colour and summer. And when you're thinking about your garden, don't just look at them as individual projects. Okay, here's the patio. We need a new patio. What are we going to do with the patio? Here's the stone for the patio. Think about your whole garden as one piece together and say, imagine an overall feel for it. Maybe you want a naturalistic garden.
Yeah.
Well, and if you can start thinking broader and bigger, it'll inform the smaller decisions as well as to what materials you'd use.
So if it's a very large space and you're thinking, well, you know what, I really can't afford to do it all, maybe you could phase it then. But once you've got that overview of where you're going, so you're not wasting money or undoing work you've done, and then build it and layer it, and maybe start with the structure, in terms, as the trees, the things that you really need to think very carefully about, because they're not going to move too easily.
I think as well as that, you're saying, people often get confused between the difference between, you know, we are implementing a garden over time. We're doing it a little bit as we can, as the budget allows and time allows. That's a different thing to starting with a really good idea, nearly almost fully formed, but not quite, and then following that over time. That way you're not undoing things. And there's some, you know, some really easy tips. I mean, there's so much information now online from garden designers and from landscapers to inform you on some of the decisions. But I mean, like, I'd say trust your instincts above everything else. I often walk into people's gardens and they say to me, well, we want a big patio up here beside, you know, beside the kitchen door. And I'm looking at it going, why is that chair halfway down your garden, just sitting there in the middle of the lawn? And say, oh, that's a lovely place to sit. Yeah, we just go down there, so we put the chair. And I said, that's where you want to be. Be there and build everything around that stuff.
So that's the opportunity that we have at the moment, to take that time to go and sit in the space or stand in the space and see, well, where is the sun, or where is there a draft, or where is there something outside of the garden maybe that you can draw in and, you know, frame that view as we say. Lots of great advice there. We're going to have to close this conversation, but I'm really mindful that Bloom is not here to inspire people the way it normally would. And that's what I really love about Bloom, because we've got those gardens there and we get those lovely jib shots, the crane coming in and swooping over, and we capture the gardens in a way that people go, wow, yeah, I get it, I love it, I want it. We can't do that this year. But what would be your thoughts? Where should people go for inspiration? What should they do while they wait for Bloom 2021? What would you advise? Final thoughts.
Oh, just get outside and have a look around you, which you've got more time to do. So you get outside and you have a look around you, you'll be inspired and you'll go home and want to do things, preferably not do everything before 11 o'clock in the day, because you've got a whole long day to fill yet. So that's the trick. But get out there and just look around you and be more observant. Then you'll be inspired.
Look to nature. Look
to nature,
to
and
the
just
builds.
look at what everybody else is doing as well. I mean, you don't even need to look at nature. You know, you look at nature for some ideas to be inspired, but just even look around you. And people walk around and they don't observe where they live, or they don't observe everything around them. If you look around you, you'll get ideas.
So copy what you
Just
like.
look.
Do what you like.
Yeah, no, certainly.
Look.
I mean,
Yeah.
Look.
I mean, look at them all walking around.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
they'd never appreciate all the neighbours' gardens, and now you see them walking up and down, looking over fences and being inspired. And there's no better way to get information on what would grow in your garden if you look at what's growing down the road.
Yeah.
It's not being nosy,
in a
is it?
similar situation, a tree in front of a window, which tree is it? Take a picture, go up to the nursery and find out, you know. And
It's not being nosy, Oliver.
what?
It's not being nosy, it's being curious.
Being curious, yeah.
There's a big difference between nosy and curious.
Cool. Thanks for clarifying that.
I'm nosy, the other people are curious.
Andy.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so much inspiration around there. I think sometimes the mistake I see people making constantly is that, you know, it's straight onto Pinterest. Look at these incredible gardens they've seen. You have to understand, similar almost in a way to a Bloom garden, there's an element of falseness about it. It's not a real living space. That photograph that you see from California of these incredible things has been, you know, manipulated and lit and as a snapshot of a moment in time. So if you want to find something that's maybe more realistic, very much as Jane says, look around you, look at nature. How does nature do something nice? And very often, like where I live, down by the coast, like I'm fascinated looking at the way, you know, grass and rocks kind of interact with each other, how weeds move around the place. Think about that. I'm not suggesting everybody's garden should have that really naturalistic look, because it's incredibly difficult to do well. But you know, try to understand how there's, as Oliver said, there's tall plants, there's small plants, and they all kind of balance themselves out. So maybe just move away from your phone a little bit and get out and have a look around. I think it's kind of almost a little disingenuous to have three people up here talking about how we do these amazing gardens, because I think pretty much all of us rely on a lot of other people, and we're standing on the shoulders of giants in many cases, I know when I do a garden, I'm bringing in knowledge that I've learned from lots of different people, from the nurseries, the growers, down to the contractors, to the engineers, whoever it is. Everybody's got some piece of information to help to it. So don't be afraid to ask questions. The biggest thing I'd encourage everybody to, and I think it's fundamentally the idea behind Bloom, is to take the fear out of gardens. I think they can be really intimidating. There's big Latin names, there's people telling you don't plant this in, there's living things that can die. I mean, it can be all quite scary, but I think everybody should just have a go and go into your local grower or nursery and say, listen, can you help me out? What would be good? And everybody would be more than willing to help.
Joking.
Apart from him.
Say, don't ask
Don't go
him.
near him.
Tired of answering questions.
I think if the message I'm hearing, if there's one message, it's that point about don't rely on images and everything that's online. So it's almost less screen time, more green time. Get out and look.
Oh,
and
that is
see.
That is
cheesy,
well
Gary.
rehearsed,
Took me
Gary.
ages
Come
to
on.
make that.
Oh, okay. Do you know what? Just put, that's just, I've had enough now,
guys,
right?
Thank you to our panel for a fantastic conversation, probably the most interesting conversation I've had in many weeks. Lots of inspiration, lots of ideas, and I hope you at home really enjoyed that. A big thank you from me, from all my colleagues in Board BIA, and all the people and organisations who come together in huge numbers every year to make Bloom the great success that it is. We look forward to seeing you next year at the Bloom Show, this time next year. See you then.